Greetings and welcome to the Professing Alls. My name is Ryan. It is great to have you here. We're going to be continuing our study of the Greek language. Now, we're actually going to start learning a little bit of Greek language. We're starting off with something simple, and is usually the first thing that most people studying Greek learn. So the first thing we're going to learn is how to form the present tense in Greek, the simple present tense, okay? I'm just going to give you one verb to work on for today, and I'll show you all the different forms, and I just want you to work on the forms. Next week we're going to learn new verbs and applying those same forms to different verbs. Okay, so we're just starting off really simple, and then we're going to add complexity progressively, and hopefully we do it step by step in a way that is intelligible to you and also easy enough to comprehend. Now, when we're talking about verbs, there are a few different things to be aware of. Verbs often change depending on how they function in a sentence and whatever tense they are in and what mood they are in. Now, in English, in the present tense, most verbs have the same form except for the third person singular. Now, let's have a look at the English verb to have, okay? Now, I've written a paradigm for have in English up here in the black. The green is what the Old English would be, okay? So in Old English, there is a little bit more distinction, even though in the plural there wasn't really much distinction, but at least in the singular there was more distinction. So you have singular verbs, so verbs referring to a singular subject. So I, you, if I'm just referring to one person, or he, or she, or it, or one, or someone. If you're referring to someone in the third person, but you're referring to one person, referring to you in the second person, but only one of you, or I, which is one of me, then that's what's called singular. If you're referring to multiple people, then that's called plural. So we have we, so I'm referring in the first person, I'm including myself, but there are multiple people I'm referring to, not just myself. You in the plural, and they, which is the third person referring to someone else. Okay, so we distinguish who the subject is based on the pronouns, or sometimes you'd swap the pronouns for nouns if it's in the third person. Okay, so I have, you have, he, she, it, or one has, we have, you have, and they have. If you're using Old English, in the second person singular, you would say thou hast, or in the third person, you would say he hath, rather than he has. So that's some of the difference between Old and contemporary English. Now, this is all in the present tense, so that's just what we're dealing with at the moment. We're not going to worry about too much about tenses or anything at the moment. So this is happening now. So I have a marker, for example. I have a phone. I have a camera. I have a whiteboard. You have a bag. He has a book. We have a house. They have a dog. So you can use have in different ways, referring to things happening now. Now, the word have doesn't change in modern English except in the third person. Most verbs, you just add the S. Sometimes the verb changes to make the S sound more natural. So haves doesn't really sound like good English. So we drop out the V, we drop out the E, which is a silent E anyway, and we have has, okay, in English. Now, this isn't just limited to English, okay? English originally comes from a Germanic language called Anglo-Saxon, which originally comes from Saxon, which is related to Germanic languages. So English is a Germanic language. But over the many years, England was occupied by Romans, by the Norman French, and then you have the time of the Renaissance. So that brings in a lot of influence from Latin, and you have some invasions from the Vikings as well, which brings some of the Nordic languages, and then you have, you've got your Welsh speakers and Gaelic speakers and Celtic speakers, which also influence English. But English is functionally a Germanic language, even though about 60% of our vocabulary is actually closer to French than what it is German, but historically and grammatically it is a Germanic language. So languages in Europe, there are a couple of exceptions, but most of the languages in Europe come from likely a similar ancestor, which is called Proto-Indo-European. It's a sort of a made-up language, the idea that all the languages of Europe that have certain similarities with one another that are distinct from other language groups like your Sino-Tibetan, which includes Chinese and a few other languages out that way, and your Indic languages like your Hindi and Tamil and Urdu, and your African languages, your Native American languages, your Native Pacific Island languages, your indigenous languages here in Australia. So there's a group of languages called Indo-European languages which have similarities with one another, but within them there are different groups. So there are Germanic languages, okay? So they function a particular way, and English is a Germanic language. But Germanic languages are related to Latin languages, also known as Romance languages, which just simply means languages from Rome, okay? It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with romance in the way that we would understand the word romance. Then you have Greek, which is also an Indo-European language. So there are similarities. So there are going to be ways in which English functions which are similar to the way that other languages function. Now, you may have studied another language in the past. So quite a lot of people in English-speaking countries learn things like French or German or Spanish. And so I put up a few examples here in German, in French, and in Portuguese, just to show you that there are similarities. So, for example, you have Ich habe, I have in German, Du hast, thou hast, hat, he has, wir haben, we have, ihr habt, you have, talking in the plural, and sie haben, they have. Okay, so that's in German. So in Germanic languages, as you can see here, the verb changes quite regularly. So you have a first person form, second person, third person in the singular. Then you have a first person, third person, which is identical, but the second person in the plural is different. Okay, so when verbs change regularly enough, usually most Romance languages drop the pronoun because the verb is generally the verb is generally sufficient because it changes forms. But Germanic languages uniquely keep their pronoun, regardless of whether the forms vary or not. You always keep the pronoun, or you've got to have a noun there supplied. In French, similar thing. They always keep the pronoun, but it's for a different reason, mainly because a lot of the forms, even though they might be written differently, they sound similar. So, for example, you have j'ai, which is I have, tu as, thou hast, or you have, il a, he has. So that S on tu as is silent. So a and a sound the same, okay? Nous avons, we have, vous avez, you have, and ils ont, they have. Okay, so most of the Romance languages, except for French, usually drop the pronoun. Okay, so usually you can just say the verb without the pronoun, but French is unique just because of the phonetics of the language. And it could also have something to do with its proximity to Germany, but I doubt it has something to do with that. Now, Portuguese is another Romance language, okay, and unlike French, the forms change regularly enough and the forms are distinct enough that you can actually drop the personal pronoun, okay? So you could say eu tenho, I have, or just tenho, I have. Tu tens, you have, or tens, you have. Ele or ela tem, which is he or she has, or tem, he has, she has. Nós temos, we have. Vós tendes, you have. Eles têm, they have. So Greek, biblical Greek, functions similar to other Romance languages. Now, Greek is a Hellenic language. It's not a Latin-based language, but the verbs form in very similar patterns to the Romance languages. And so for that, you can almost ignore the pronouns altogether. Now, pronouns obviously do appear in different forms, but we're going to learn the verbs without the pronouns because you don't really need them, okay? Now, I'm saying all this just to give you a bit of an overview. You don't obviously need to memorize the German and the French and the Portuguese here, but I'm just showing you patterns that appear in Indo-European languages because Greek is going to follow a similar suit. Okay, so what is the Greek verb for to have? Now, in English, when you go to a dictionary, and this is quite common with almost every Indo-European language, the form that you'll find in the dictionary is what's called the infinitive form. So in English, you'll find the English form to have, or specifically to, is usually dropped out in a dictionary, but the full infinitive form is to have. So you'll never find has in a dictionary, for example, or had, or you wouldn't find had or has in the dictionary. You got to find it under to have, which is have. Okay. In Greek is unique. Now, Greek does have infinitive forms, but you never find a verb in the infinitive in a dictionary or in a lexicon. Okay. So lexicon is just a Greek dictionary. Okay. It's just a fancy way of saying dictionary specifically for the Greek language. So what you will find is you'll find it in the first person singular form. So you'll find it as I have. Okay. So this goes with every verb. You've got to know the first person singular form of the verb to find it in the dictionary. Now in Greek, the verb to have or I have is echo. 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 Or if you can't pronounce that ch sound, echo. 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 So it's like echo. I have an echo in my room. Okay. So how do we change echo to the other forms? Okay. So I have is echo. You have. Now this is the singular form. Now you don't need to learn Old English to learn a foreign language. But if you're going to translate between English, modern English, and Greek, or vice versa, if you want to distinguish you have in the singular and you have in the plural, just write you have with an S at the end to imply it's singular, or P if it's going to be plural, okay? Over time, you're not going to worry too much about it. You'll just instinctively know which one's which, and you're not going to have to worry too much about it. But while you're learning, just do this, okay? So this one is echis. Echis. So remember the epsilon iota produces the long E sound. So you have echis. 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 Now he has. Now I'm writing he has just simply he has, but this could be he has, she has, it has, or one has. Okay, so the point is that it's a third person, but it all uses one form in Greek. Now it's almost exactly the same as echis. Okay, echi. Echi. So the difference is the sigma. So echis, you have. Echi, he has. Echo, I have. We have is echomen. 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 I have. You have, in the plural, έχετε. 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 They have, Echusen. Echusen. Now that's all we're going to do today, okay? So I just want you to work on this paradigm to learn the verb echo and its different forms, okay? That's all you got to learn for the next episode. The next episode, we're going to learn similar forms, but of different verbs, okay? So it's been good having you here. If you've liked this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.